Bhagavad Gita, Chapter 1, Part 1. The Bhagavad Gita is a dialogue between Arjuna, the commander-in-chief of the Pandavas in the battle of Kurukshetra, and Krishna, the great incarnation of God, his charioteer in the battlefield. Now you may think, why should incarnation of God, who is revered and worshipped by thousands and millions, appear in the battlefield? Some think that Krishna worship is an imitation of Christ worship, and it was introduced in India after Christ. The Christian missionaries think that Krishna worship first began to counteract their activity. But the views are not at all historical ones. In history, we read that Megasthenes, the Greek ambassador, came to India and lived in the court of Chandragupta about 300 years before the birth of Christ. And in his accounts, we find that Krishna worship was widely practiced at that time. Krishna was described as the Indian Hercules. Yudhishthira, by the prowess and valor of his brothers, had won the sovereignty over all India. He had a cousin whose name was Turyothana, and who, bitterly envying him, designed a treacherous gambling match to which he challenged Yudhishthira. It was the custom of the warrior class at that time that when any one of the caste would challenge another, the latter was in honor bound to accept it. So when Yudhishthira was challenged, being bound by the laws of the warrior caste, he accepted the challenge and was vanquished. Yudhishthira relinquished his kingdom and wandered about for a long time. He was repeatedly urged by his brothers and wife, who had been subjected to all sorts of insults and indignities, to gain forcible possession of the empire of which he had been deceitfully robbed. They had robbed him for his kingdom and forced him to wander for 12 long years, and for 1 year to live incognito. But then he was urged by his brothers to take possession of his empire. Yudhishthira was a very pious and truthful man, and he never spoke anything but the truth. In truth, he was as good in his life. Once he said, "Listen to my vow of truth. Virtue I chose in preference to life and immortality. Kingdoms and children and fame and wealth altogether are not worth and 16th part of the value of truth." So after all these years, and after having strictly fulfilled his vows, he returned to ask for his own share, barely 5 villages, for the maintenance of himself and his brothers, but was disdainfully refused by his enemy Turyothana. Turyothana is described as the personification of treachery and cruelty. So here are the two extremes, the good and the evil. Krishna personally went to Duryodhana and solicited him to make peace by restoring half of the kingdom. Some people may think that when Krishna was so powerful a hero, why could he not prevent Turyothana from fighting? I will read some extracts of his speech which he gave before Vidura. Before entering into the court of the king Duryodhana, he said, "I know the evil heart of Duryodhana. Yet, knowing all this, I have come to the Kuru's chief today, as it is he who could see from the news of death all this earth about to lie desolate with its men, steeds, elephants, and chariots. Is there any doubt that a man who strives with all his might for a righteous purpose acquires merit even though he should fail of his purpose? He who cometh not to the succor of a friend, falling into peril, the wise will call him an inhuman wretch. He who prevents a friend from an evil deed, even to the extent of seizing him by the hair, such a man is beyond all reproach, etc. Why did Duryodhana say after that? He refused to give the Pandavas even an inch of land covered by a sword's sharp point. So it was not Krishna's fault. He tried his best, but Duryodhana refused, and the result was a battle. The Bhagavad Gita contains the dialogue between Krishna and Arjuna, the Guru and the disciple. Arjuna asked Krishna to put the chariot in the center of the field, from where he could see both parties, and there he asked questions, and Krishna answered. There are 18 chapters and 700 verses in the Bhagavad Gita. In these verses we find the description of various systems of spiritual sadhana. In the Gita we find first there is Karma Yoga, then Raja Yoga, then Bhakti Yoga, and then Gyan Yoga. So the Bhagavad Gita is a synthesis of all kinds of spiritual practice or sadhana. Or it can be said that the Bhagavad Gita contains the essence of the Vedas and the Upanishads. Sri Krishna himself said that the Gita is the extract of the Upanishads, that is, all the Upanishadic truths are contained in the Gita. And so its outlook or viewpoint is so literal and universal. Now, what do we mean by Upanishad? It means that philosophy which describes how to obtain self-knowledge, and so the Upanishad is called Vedanta. In fact, everything that Krishna said in the Gita can be traced through the Upanishads and Vedas. Sri Krishna, the great incarnation of God, also said that he came to fulfill and not to destroy. Such was the divine words that came out from the mouth of the present incarnation of God. Bhagwan Sri Ramakrishna, Sri Krishna revealed all truths of the Upanishad and has given life and strength to them. The Upanishads and the Vedas are compared to cows. The milkman is Krishna, Arjuna is the calf, and the milk is the Bhagavad Gita, and the drinker of the milk are the wise men. So in every line of the Bhagavad Gita, you will notice deep philosophical problems and their answers. It is itself the Upanishad or Vedanta. Thank you.